Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast. This is the Doctor is In series, episode 269. I'm Chris Hednaghi, CEO and founder of Social Engineer LLC, the Innocent Lives Foundation, and the Institute for Social Engineering. And this podcast has been around since way back in 2009. And since this is the Doctor is In series, our resident in-house SECom doc is none other than Dr. Abbie. Nice to have you here.
Good to be here, Chris. I'm Dr. Abbie Maroño. I'm a behavioral scientist and the director of education at Social Engineer.
You really simplified that and made that really easy
so
to remember.
I do other stuff as well. I'm
Tons
the
of
director
other
of
stuff.
Education, etc.
Etc. Yeah, we should. Yes, that's it. Etc. Yeah, Agreed. Okay, let's talk a little bit about our sponsor for the show, which is Social Engineer. We have a couple really exciting things that we want to mention. I know I've mentioned this on quite a few podcasts, but I'm going to keep doing it. The Human Behavior Conference is back. Dr. Abbie, Joe Navarro, and myself will be October 30 at Rollins University here in Orlando at the Rice Pavilion for one full day of amazing content. And afterwards, we're all going to get to hang out. So we hope that you will join us and learn some amazing things. Joe's going to cover nonverbals and how to use them and also read them. Abbie's going to cover her own. She made a framework for influence and influencing decisions, and she's going to teach you that. And I'm going to be going over elicitation and pretexting and practical application of all those skills in everyday life. Honestly, when we sat down and talked about if we were to sell these things separate to corporations, this is about a $50,000 package. And we put it all together for $249. So hopefully you'll be able to make it with us. There's only, I think, 160 seats left. Maybe 150. I'm not sure. We're limited the amount at Rice Pavilion, and we can't expand it because there's a certain amount due to fire codes. So if you go out to humanbehaviorcon.com, you can check out the itinerary. You can see how many tickets are left, and we'll be more than happy to have you there. If you have any questions, just reach out. And as usual, please keep going to social-engineer.com and check out our new services. We have new AI social engineering services as well as a hybrid service. I won't even tell you what they are. You can go look them up. And you can download some of the marketing content and see what kind of services we're offering and hope to be working with you at some time in the future. If you're an enthusiast for social engineering and you like the topic, you should join our Slack channel. The link is in the show notes, but there we have over 1,500 people every day talking about all different aspects of SE, from pretexting, elicitation, to people who actually use it every day who need help with their pretext, to people who are just wanting to learn, students who are enthusiasts and want to continue to practice the skills. So you can join us there. It is a family-friendly and legal area to chat about social engineering. So if that sounds like you can join us. And I want to invite everyone to take a moment to go check out innocentlivesfoundation.org. The nonprofit there is focused on helping law enforcement geolocate people who traffic children and create child abuse material. And I'm so proud of the last 6.5 years of being alive in this organization. We have done over 520 cases. That means we have handed 520 cases into law enforcement around the globe. That number is just staggering. When I started this, I thought maybe we'd get a few dozen in a year or so. So to be sitting on 520 plus is a really proud number for us. And I want to invite you all to join us at our second annual Ending Child Exploitation Gala. It's out in LA. We're going to be having it at a studio. Last year, we had an amazing band, the Action Figures. They're a bunch of actors that are very good musicians that have action figures. So that's what they named their band. And they fell in love with us. We fell in love with them. And they offered their studio to us for the gala this year. So we're going to be out there. They call it the Woodshed. It's going to be a ton of fun, not a formal one like we did last year. So you can go check out innocentlivesfoundation.org/gala. And you can get information on coming to there or sponsoring or just information on how we'll be attending that and all the things that will be happening there. I hope to see you out there. It's going to be a real fun event. And if you like the music on this show, it is none other than Clutch. Go check them out at clutchmerch.com. And the best way to take them in is to go see them live. And they're on tour again, as always. I don't know how they do it because they're constantly on tour, but you can go check out their shows and where they're playing and see them live. And that would be amazing. Of course, Neil helped me start the ILF 6.5 years ago, 7 years ago. As a matter of fact, was our first meeting as of July last month was our first meeting talking about ILF 7 years ago, if you can believe that. Okay, last but not least, if you like the content of this episode, give us a thumbs up and a like. Please keep giving us your ideas for themes, and we use them. So we come up with themes, Abbie and I, for this episode, but for all the other episodes too. We'll take your advice, and if you have a certain psychological theme that you want us to talk about, you want Abbie to do the research about, please put it in the notes down on the YouTube channel. We take all of those, and we'd love to be able to use your idea as part of our podcast. Okay, Dr. Abbie, every month you kind of pick a really crazy idea. We had some really good ones in the past. What is this month's?
This one might be a little bit confronting for a lot of people, but we're talking about self-sabotage.
Why are you attacking me on my own podcast?
Yep. There's going to be a lot of people that feel very attacked. And what you find with psychology actually is when you teach a concept, people often feel that it's aimed at them. They feel really personal because they are very confronting. So get ready to be confronted.
Yes. Okay, so let's start off with the basic question. First of all, what is self-sabotage? What is it?
Okay, so great question. Self-sabotage refers to when we engage in behaviors or thought patterns that prevent us from pursuing or achieving our goals. It can be driven both consciously or unconsciously, and it's typically an attempt to cope with anxiety or fear, or other negative emotions. Fear.
Yeah, whatever we call it now. It's a new type of fear.
Pardon?
Nothing.
I've thrown myself right off. But behaviors, self-sabotage behaviors can be things like procrastination, avoidance, engaging unhealthy relationships, ending healthy relationships, impulsivity, risky behaviors, so forth. It's a broad spectrum. The way that I like to think about what it is imagine you want something so badly, a place, a person, a possession, an opportunity, and you want it so bad that you're terrified to lose it or have it taken away from you. And you're that scared that you purposefully let it go. So our actions have directly caused the outcome that we're afraid of happening. And that's what self-sabotage is.
Okay, so let me ask a question on this, because you listed some of the aspects like procrastination, which I think all of us can be guilty of. So does that mean anytime someone procrastinates, it's self-sabotage? Is that the equation?
I guess to a very small degree, we all do self-sabotage in minor ways. But procrastination can occur for a number of reasons, exhaustion, tiredness, not necessarily self-sabotage. It can be a sign too, if you're procrastinating, that you're not self-sabotaging, you're just overworked and you're exhausted and you don't have the emotional capacity to deal with that thing. But I guess it's still technically a self-sabotage because you're not achieving what you want, but it wouldn't really come underneath the idea of self-sabotage as we're going to discuss it.
Yeah, because I think that one that you mentioned last, like the relationship, I had a friend that did that. Like they would get into a great relationship and they were so afraid of losing the person that they actually did the things that made the person leave. And it was like, when you see it from the outside, you're like, what are you doing? You told me you were going to die if this person left, and you're doing all the things that they said not to do, right? It's like, what the heck?
It's one of the most common things we see in relationships and in careers. And to be honest, the main reason that I wanted to talk about it in this episode is because of relationships. I saw it myself too in someone, and realized that people don't always realize that they're self-sabotaging. And then when you bring it up and explain the reasons behind it, it kind of has that moment. So I think it's something that we avoid recognizing in ourselves because it's very confronting, like we said. So hopefully, as we talk through some of the reasons, it might kind of trigger that feeling in some people, and they might realize that they've been self-sabotaging too. It's a very common thing we see in relationships.
So we talk about relationships, but what are some other reasons why someone might self-sabotage? Well, there must be other reasons for it.
Yes. So it's very complicated, but self-sabotage, ironically, is ultimately a self-protective mechanism. It's just a maladaptive self-protection mechanism. And there's there are tons of drivers, but we'll talk about the main ones. And the first is fear of failure, which makes a lot of sense. When an individual fears failing, they might engage in behaviors that prevent them from fully committing to their goals. And by doing so, they can attribute the lack of success to external factors, or insufficient effort rather than a lack of ability. So if you're worried about affecting your self-esteem or your ego, if you self-sabotage, it's because of a lack of effort. It's not because I'm not good enough. It's because I didn't really try hard enough. You might not apply for a job or a promotion because you're scared you won't get it. So you didn't get it because you didn't apply.
Right. And then you can tell yourself it wasn't failure.
Yes.
It just didn't happen. Right. I'm not going to ask that girl out because she's never going to say yes. And then, of course, you don't get the girl. And then it's like, well, I knew that was going to happen anyway. Right.
Yep. You save yourself that, negative ego effect, self-esteem. Yeah. And I would see this all the time with students who procrastinate for studying for really important exams. And one of the reasons that people might do this, again, there's a lot of reasons, but one reason is that they are consciously believe that they're going to fail. And if you believe you're going to fail and procrastinate, well, this is why I failed. It wasn't because I'm not intelligent enough, I'm not capable, because I didn't try. So it really does help us protect ourselves. And again, that's why it's self-protective, but it's maladaptive, self-protective.
So, okay, fear of failure makes sense. Relationship, fear of rejection makes sense. But why fear of success? That doesn't make any sense to me.
So fear of success is a really interesting one. And this is one that really gets a lot of people. And we will go back to that fear of rejection too, because we've kind of touched on it.
Okay.
But there's a little bit deeper that we can go to. But fear of success is success often brings expectations. It brings responsibilities and visibility too. So if and I have found this, and I know that I would hold myself back previously because of fear of success, I would get an opportunity. And if I took that opportunity, for example, I got offered to do an assessment for Forbes Breaking News, and I took it eventually, but I almost didn't. I almost self-sabotaged it because I knew that with that would come publicity. And with that visibility, I could be criticized. And it's very overwhelming sometimes to get the things that you want. So that feeling of being overwhelmed by, okay, well, this is going to bring now expectations and responsibilities if I succeed. And that's really confronting, and that's really overwhelming. And we might fear that we're not able to sustain that success. And just because you want something doesn't mean that you believe you can handle the pressure. So I know, I was very, very excited for my book to come out, but I was also very scared about the pressure that's going to come with that. And the same with doing anything publicly, like you really want to get this big speech, and then you get it and you think, now I have to do it. Yeah. You see people applying for these jobs that they really want, and then they get it and they go, oh God, now I have to do the job. So that fear of success is, and it's not fear of failure so much as like I'm going to get it and not be able to do it. It's, can I sustain it? All of the pressure that comes with it. Is it going to be too much for me? I have the capabilities to do it, but am I actually going to be able to sustain that? Because it can be really emotionally overwhelming. Just think about how comfortable the comfort zone is. We stay in the comfort zone because it's familiar. Anything that's unfamiliar is really frightening. It's nerve-wracking. Success can be really unfamiliar. So it can make us psychologically want to reject it in a sense.
So then when you said that last thing, I started thinking about Ryan, right? Like Ryan exists in loving to put himself out of his comfort zone. That's how he always grew.
Ryan who?
Ryan McDougall.
Okay, will the audience know this?
No, they will now.
Someone who worked with social engineering.
Yeah, they will now because
just a random Ryan.
A random Ryan, just some Ryan that nobody knows. So Ryan McDougall, when he was here, the COO, one of my good friends, he always put himself out of his comfort zone in order to expand his horizons. So why are some people prone to self-sabotage, and why are some people like Ryan who are not prone to that?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. One is largely low self-esteem. People with low self-esteem, they doubt their abilities and worthiness. So they will often engage in behaviors that confirm that negative self-view. For example, they will avoid challenges or tasks because they believe they're not capable of the success. And then the avoidance reinforces the low self-esteem. And it creates this really vicious cycle of self-sabotage and limiting opportunities for growth. They then don't develop those skills. So if they say, well, I'm not capable enough, they don't develop the skills because they don't go for the opportunities. And then it's reinforcing of, yeah, I don't have the capability, I'm less competent. And it is this really negative cycle. And kind of linking it back to what I said, fear of rejection. One of the other reasons that some people might be more prone to it is because some people have a really deep-seated fear of being vulnerable. And being vulnerable is scary because it involves exposing your true self and your fears and insecurities. That's really daunting.
Yeah.
And sometimes the success that comes with those opportunities can make you vulnerable. For example, if it brings extra attention, well, it could expose some vulnerabilities. If it puts you where you are in the limelight, it could expose some vulnerabilities. Or in a leadership role. And if you're scared of being vulnerable, think about what that means for fear of failure.
Yeah.
If you already feel very vulnerable and you don't necessarily want to expose that true self, with those insecurities, there typically is that low self-esteem because you're afraid of being seen. Now, why would we be afraid of being seen? Well, because people won't accept us. So now if you have a fear of failure, you're just kind of adding to that list of why I don't feel good about myself. So we try and create barriers to that, and self-sabotage can be a really comforting barrier. If you are feeling scared of being vulnerable, if you do have low self-esteem, I'm going to put this sabotage behavior there because now I'm not going to be confronted with the consequences of my actions.
So can someone with low self-esteem still be found putting themselves out of their comfort zone?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not quite as simple as you have one thing and then it means that you necessarily self-sabotage. It's really complicated. These are factors that have shown a statistical significance of contributing to self-sabotage. It's usually, can't think of a better word than cauldron of things, a collection of factors. And other things are things like childhood experiences. So children who have grown up in environments where they receive inconsistent or critical feedback, they might develop a really fragile sense of self-worth, which makes them more prone to low self-esteem. And this can lead to both the fear of failure or success or both, because they may associate that achievement with increased scrutiny or potential criticism. So think about if you have a parent who is really controlling, and if you succeed in something, they push you harder and they want you to be the best. And if you're not the absolute best, there's more criticism. And each time you win, it's kind of more pressure on. Think about what that might do to them psychologically, where they're going to start to associate, well, I have that success, I move up the ranks. Now I'm going to have more scrutiny. It can be really traumatic. And then on the flip side, children who experience neglect or trauma, well, it's not so much success that they fear, but they just generally develop really negative and maladaptive coping mechanisms often. And typically that's to protect themselves from emotional pain because they don't have the emotional intelligence and capability yet to develop those healthier coping mechanisms because they haven't got anyone to model them from. So it's really complicated, and personality also plays a factor.
Yeah, I would agree with that part, especially because I would say for me, like I've never self-sabotaged because of fear of success, right? Yeah. That's never bothered me, but I've definitely self-sabotaged because of fear of failure and fear of rejection multiple times, right? And even knowing it and seeing it and during doing it, saying, I know exactly what I'm doing, still doing it because it felt safer than potentially getting rejected or potentially failing, right? It felt better to do that, which is weird to think of because I also love putting myself out of my comfort zone. That's one way I've grown in my career and even in myself. But when I do it, I definitely take paths of like stepping out of my comfort zone in places where I kind of know I'm going to be good, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
really bad at drawing and I'm really bad at painting and I don't have a good singing voice. So we go to karaoke. My family loves karaoke. I don't sing. I never do it. They try, they beg me, they try to do anything possible. They put a mic in my face. I don't sing. And I just don't do it. Right. And maybe I'll be great. Maybe who knows, but I think I suck. So I'm not going to even try, but I'll put myself out there for other things. Right.
Yeah. And that's not self-sabotaging because it's not a goal. So it's not just not engaging in a behavior that can help you. That's not necessarily self-sabotaging. Okay. It's when you have a goal or something that you want and the behavior you're engaging in is stopping you getting that.
Yeah.
So say, if I went on stage, maybe I'd be an amazing singer and get this opportunity. If I don't actually want that, if I don't go on stage, it's not self-sabotage because it's not a goal of mine to have these things. So I'm not purposefully getting in my own way.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's why I always try and think of it as if there's something that you want so bad, you purposely get rid of it because it's your actions that led or inaction that led to you not getting that thing that you possibly could have had.
Yeah.
And one thing that is in relationships, we see this a lot, is avoidant attachment styles. But we can also have avoidant personalities. So avoidant personalities, it's a psychological and emotional pattern that cause people to avoid emotional intimacy and emotional closeness. So you really, really want it, and then it comes near you, and you go, "Oh God, I get it away from me."
I know
that's
someone like that.
very self-sabotaging, and it's quite a common thing. And I used to myself have an avoidant attachment style, and it came from a lack of emotional care from my mom and bad experiences as a child. And it's something you can change if you actively work on it. And just because you have an avoidant personality and avoidant tendencies doesn't mean that it can't be changed. And for example, people with avoidant personalities tend to be really hypersensitive to rejection and criticism. So they avoid situations where they fear they might fail or be judged. For me, those were the driving factors for self-sabotage. I feared that I would be judged and not accepted. And when you recognize those things in yourself, you can say, okay, well, there's a problem here. Now I recognize there's a problem. You go underneath of, why do I have these problems? What is it that's driving them? And you can start addressing them. So everything that we've talked about, it's not set in stone. And again, if you do have low self-esteem or you do struggle with vulnerability, doesn't necessarily mean you are someone who self-sabotages. It's more complicated than that. They are just factors that can be changed, but don't necessarily lead to self-sabotage.
I get that because, my father was a literal genius. Like, I'm not saying that just hyperbole. Like he never went to high school. He went straight to college, he had a really high IQ, but he was also a terrible narcissist. So if you ever asked for help, like if I needed math help, the way he would help would be like, well, how come you don't understand this? What are you, stupid? Right. And then I wouldn't get help. Right. So there would never be help because it was like I stopped asking, because if I asked and I didn't get it the first time, if he tried to explain it, well, you're just dumb. You're not going to be able to do this. Right. So I purposely failed at school. Right. And just be like, I'm not even going to try. And then I'm in my senior year and a guidance counselor says, listen, if you don't get at least straight B's for your final quarter, you're going to fail and you're not going to graduate. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, I'm not staying in school. So I just got straight A's. I just got straight A's. I was smart. I could do it. I just chose to not do it because it was better than having him tell me I'm dumb. Yeah, I'll just prove him right. I'm dumb. Yeah. I know I'm not dumb. I didn't even try. I failed on purpose, not handing in papers, skipping school, kind of stuff like that. So I could see that pattern. And it was definitely because of the way, I was raised by my parents that I did those things.
And just think about too, what else could be self-sabotaging to come from that. If you repeatedly ask for help and you're told to go away, you're not going to receive help. One way that we can then self-sabotage in a way that we feel is protecting us. So again, because remember, it's maladaptive self-protection. So what we might do is we're going to develop independence. Okay, well, no one's going to come to help me, so I need to do this myself.
Yep.
Where it becomes maladaptive and it becomes, because independence isn't self-sabotaging. That's very, very healthy. Where it becomes self-sabotage is where it's hyper independence, where you do things by yourself, you look after yourself, you're very independent. But now there's times that you actually really need someone.
And you're not asking.
And you go, I don't need anyone. I can do this myself. It's become hyper independent. And now you're limiting your ability to do it. And not every instance is that. Say sometimes you go, I know you can help me, but I really need to do this on my own. It's not self-sabotage.
Sure.
We might just, we want to grow. It's our journey. We want to learn from our mistakes.
Yeah.
But there's that fine line of where it's now limiting you. And when we see it consistently across our behavior, we're not accepting the help that we need because we don't believe that we're actually going to get it, or maybe we don't believe we're going to that we deserve it, or that we believe that we are the only person that can help us because of those experiences that we've been through.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it walks the line from healthy to unhealthy.
So obviously, if we're dealing with this because of childhood trauma, it's a good idea to get some clinical help, a therapist, some things like that. But are there things that people who are listening to this podcast that they can try to do if they're suffering from constant self-sabotage, that maybe some steps they can take to try to bypass some of those behaviors?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing, like you said, is support. And not everybody is open to a therapist and maybe not feel emotionally ready, but a therapist can provide really effective support. But also talking to friends, and maybe if you're not ready for a therapist, maybe speak to a counselor. But if you recognize them in yourself, there's things you can do. Start challenging those negative thoughts, because CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is based on the premise of we can change our own thought patterns. So when you feel the thought come in, purposefully challenge it. Think, well, did that happen last time? Or what's the likelihood of this happening? Or, what if something slightly different comes out? What if, what would I say if this was somebody else? What advice would I give them? Start to actively challenge it, because what we do find is the advice we give to other people that we might really believe in isn't always what we think for ourselves. And challenge that. Don't just be passive to your emotions, really be active with them. And I do recommend gradual exposure under the guise of a therapist, because it can be really triggering. But exposing yourself to situations where rejection is possible can really help you build resilience. Chris, like you said you do, you're in situations that make you uncomfortable. When you step out of your comfort zone to small degrees each time, you kind of build up that resilience. It's really effective. And of course, building self-esteem and self-compassion. So recognizing if you're someone that isn't very compassionate to yourself, it's really important to start working on that. And when you start to be kinder to yourself, that fear of rejection can start to diminish, because you don't rely so much on the external for reassurance. You start to build a healthier self-image. And there's a lot of resources online, a lot of resources. And we also have to remember that it's something that it doesn't make us weak. You can be really emotionally capable and still self-sabotage. And one thing that comes to mind is, Chris, I remember you made me challenge my self-sabotage. And it was, I had been in a relationship for a long time, and the beginning of starting to see someone, I was absolutely self-sabotaging. So I would call up Chris and say, this is what I want to do. This is what I don't want to do. And he would literally say, okay, stay on the phone to me. Talk through how you're feeling, what you want to do. And you made me aware of what I kind of knew I was doing. And that social support is so essential, because I think I would have continued to self-sabotage if I hadn't have had that guidance. And then having that guidance allowed me to then go off and start to challenge my own negative thoughts. But I don't think I would have broken that cycle if not for someone that I trusted and cared about being honest with me too. So if you are concerned, I really would say the first step is speaking to someone that you trust and having that outside perspective.
Yeah. So I want to ask about, by the way, thank you for the kind words. I want to ask you about the building self-esteem or self-care, because you said it's a good thing to do, but I can almost imagine someone sitting here listening going, how? If I'm one of these people that wakes up every day, just like, I don't even want to look in the mirror because I hate what I see. How am I going to start building that self-compassion and self-esteem?
Well, it starts with getting to the root of why you don't feel good. Because you can't fix something when you don't know what the problem is. It's like if you build a house on poor foundations, it's going to come crumbling down. Yeah. If you just start, I'm going to dress well, and I'm going to do these things, and I'm going to feel really good, I'm going to, do these things that present my outside differently without fixing the inside, it's not going to last. So you've really got to do some soul searching as to why is it you don't feel good. And the easiest way to start, and it's so effective, journaling. I journal now every night, and as you're journaling and just having a brain dump, you realize things. And just talking it through with yourself, because imagine all those thoughts are in your head, they're having a go at you and they're going round and round and round. They want to come out. Yeah. Just dumping it into a journal without any pressure of it needs to make any sense, anyone's going to read it, just getting it out. It can really give you realizations into, that's what I was thinking, or that's why I did it. Yeah. So starting with that, and then I would say there is a lot of self-help books there. I have a self-help book that is now published that you could read that will be really helpful. But there's a lot of resources that are free and readily available online.
That's an interesting concept about journaling. It's not something I ever found super comfortable, but you're also like maybe the third or fourth person that has given that piece of advice when it comes to building self-esteem and self-compassion. So there must be some validation to it, because many people who have skill in this area have actually said it.
There's research, a lot of really good research showing that when we journal or when we write down our feelings, and it doesn't actually have to be every night, it doesn't have to be in a journal, it can be on your phone, on your laptop, you can literally write it in the air with your fingers, and it has the exact same psychological release. They did this study and they had people write it down on different methods, including literally writing it in the air. But the act of trying to get your thoughts into something tangible, just words, is a psychological release. And over time, engaging in that behavior, even if it's just a couple times a month, maybe once a week, completely up to how it feels comfortable to you, it led to greater self-discovery, and it increased feelings of happiness too, because we do start to get that emotional release. We don't have those emotions just built up constantly in our head and being suppressed. We're letting them out. So don't underestimate the psychological effect that it can have. And if you're feeling too much pressure by it, what some people do is, I have to do it every night at this time. Well, now you're not making it a release, you're making it a chore. So if it starts to feel like it's a chore, reduce the amount that you're doing it. That's not the goal.
You're right.
It's to give you a release, not to add stress to your life.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Well, another really good topic that I think will help a lot of people. The last few, we've gotten some really amazing comments online about how much it's been affecting people and helping them. So I think this one is probably something a lot of people battle with without really maybe even realizing that they're battling with it as much as they are.
Yeah.
So this is some good advice. So we'll keep all this, everyone, in the show notes. As usual, Dr. Abbie has about a page worth of research and references that we will put into the show notes in case you are also loving reading scientific papers, and you can take a look at some of where this information came from for today's episode. And we'll put a link to Dr. Abbie's new book too, because if you haven't heard it from the previous episode last month, that book came out, and it is a really great self-help book, not about social engineering at all. So you should definitely pick it up. And it can, if you're dealing with this, I believe it can help you with a lot of those things that are
We
going
also
through your head.
do have the Doctor's Corner on the ILF, and there is a blog there that deep dives into self-sabotage.
Excellent. Yeah. So go to innocentliesfoundation.org. On the top menu, you'll be able to find the Doctor's Corner. That's where Abbie writes self-help things for victims and people who've gone through this trauma of child abuse and things like that. You can find that article there. We'll put a link to that in the show notes also, so it'll be easy for you to find. Okay, before we sign off, Dr. Abbie, what is next month's topic?
This is going to be another one that will feel very personal. Attachment styles. I thought we'd bring it back to the basics of psychology. We're going to talk attachment styles.
What is this? Like you got mad at me or something, and you just decided to come up with a bunch of topics that are let's humiliate Chris.
Aggressive.
Yeah, that's well. Come back next month for another embarrassing episode of In Chris's Life. No, thanks again, Doctor, and thank you all for joining us this month. Hopefully, you enjoyed this. Stay safe out there. Until next month. See you.